All right, good afternoon, everybody. I figured I'm driving to the library right now. I want to do basically a video of my introduction to the spirituality groups I do at work. Since I can't really record those because of patient confidentiality, HIPAA laws, and so forth, because the patients do speak up and have discussions. We get into very interesting topics, and really it's a shame because it would be great if I could record these, because some of them are very good. Not all of them are, but every now and then there's a group that's like, oh, this I hit the ball out of the park here. So basically, I perform a spirituality group. I facilitate a spirituality group where I work. It's a state facility, a mental facility. And the definition of spirituality, according to what the state describes to us, is whatever makes your life meaningful. So, obviously for a lot of people that is religion, but it goes beyond religion. It's a very broad description. One of the patients, who's a very religious person, is Catholic, he gets very upset. He says, who are Albany to go and say what is spirituality and what isn't spirituality? I said, well, they're not saying what isn't spirituality. They're just giving a broad definition. And he said, oh, but what are they? It's not for Cuomo to decide these things. And I'm like, well, I don't think Cuomo himself is deciding this, but I personally, even though I tend to be politically conservative or more or less libertarian in a lot of things, and maybe that's why I'm comfortable with this, probably more because politically I lean more toward the libertarian side than the conservative side in certain ways, even though I'm personally conservative, but politically libertarian, I guess, would be the approach that I would say. Is that I do feel very comfortable with this definition of spirituality being, something that is all-encompassing and is like is described there, whatever makes your life meaningful. That this idea of meaningful life is very important. Having meaning in life is extremely, extremely important. And without it, we're really missing something. We're really losing out if we don't have meaning in our lives. And particularly working in a mental facility, it's very easy for people to lose meaning in their life, for people to feel dehumanized, just feel like animals. And so that's why spirituality is so vital in life. Of course, not only for people who are being treated for mental illness, but for all people, for everybody to have meaning in life, whether or not that meaning is religious or even supernatural, doesn't really make a difference as far as it being a basic need to experience meaning in life. And so I go through how I understand that when it says that whatever makes your life meaningful is spirituality, the way I understand that, not necessarily what the state is saying, is that spirituality, therefore, is, how I understand it, the difference between a human being and an animal. Even though we could say that animals perhaps experience a form of spirituality, or we certainly like to anthropomorphize animals as spiritual beings, whether or not that's true, there's really no way for us to know. We can see certain things, but that we can still, we might be anthropomorphizing the animals. animals. But for lack of a better term, all of these things can be declared as spiritual. Religion is the obvious one, and there are other obvious spiritual paths, such as meditation, philosophy. Maybe these things, religion, meditation, philosophy, maybe we can consider a top tier level of spirituality, and then we can move on to a second tier of things that most people would consider to be spiritual expressions, things like art and the various arts, music and even film, has a lot of these aspects of spirituality. Whether they're used, now all of these things can be used within the context of these other spiritual, maybe the top tier spiritual, the first tier spiritual expressions. Religion certainly draws on art, music, even film, drama, things like that. Drama actually began as a religious expression in ancient Greece. And so, these are things that are also perhaps obviously spiritual, but less obviously spiritual. But then we could kind of say there's a third tier spirituality that really indeed is totally spiritual by virtue of our definition, the state's definition, at least New York State's definition, that it's whatever makes your life meaningful. To say that things like science, mathematics, and certainly history and politics are indeed spiritual. Most people would think these are totally not spiritual. But again, when we say that which brings meaning to our life, doesn't have to be supernatural. Obviously we can put on the top tier things like ethics and morals and even culture and things like that. So, but on this bottom tier, science and math and politics and history, religions definitely have history and politics to them, but many religions also have connections to science and mathematics. Judaism certainly makes a big deal about mathematics, gematrias. There is a certain type of a sacred mathematics, different than the Greek sacred mathematics, obviously, very different. It's biblically based, the Jewish gematrias, but it's pretty clear that there is this gematria system is something that is quite ancient and most likely most likely biblical. So we could go on a little bit in a different direction. What I always say, people look at me, I'm a rabbi, I usually dress a little bit more rabbinical than I am at the moment. And they assume that the group that we do at the hospital is a Jewish group, and I say no, that we have a Jewish service, every week in each unit, not each unit, but each building and so forth. Excuse me. But the spirituality group is specifically not designed to be catering to any one particular religion. Now, I might bring in things from Judaism just because that's what I'm familiar with. That's what I know about. But the fact of the matter, excuse me, again, how we define spirituality goes above and beyond simply religion. One of the patients, he says, well, rock and roll is my religion. And I point out that even we can validate that, to a certain extent. I mean, lot of people, it's funny, you could go to a concert and feel like you're in church, and you could go to a church and feel like you're at a concert, right? These days. Meaning, I don't mean necessarily a church in the Christian church sense, but a lot of people, have expressed, going to certain concerts, even if there's nothing particularly religious in the content of the concert, and but they're expressing modes of spirituality that are meaningful to them, and even if they're not along the lines of the traditional spirituality. And it doesn't have to be, the traditional Abrahamic spirituality. I mean, obviously, Western Abrahamic spirituality. You have many other, there are traditional Eastern forms of spirituality. Obviously, goes without saying. I'm passing by, where the Woodstock concert took place, and the Swami Sachidati, I don't remember his name. He was there. I know there was one in German, was very controversial, and he had the Shaykhs to Lubavitcher Rebbe. He was really one of the first shluchim Lubavitcher Rebbe sent, and when he went in his own path, very different than Lubavitcher Rebbe, he, although somewhat similar in his own way, he said something to Lubavitcher Rebbe, how come, if the Swami Sachidati was at Woodstock, why wasn't the Lubavitcher Rebbe there? Lubavitcher Rebbe never went anywhere. He went to the oil and that's it. And once or twice he went to Parksville. So after he was Rebbe, I mean. So all right, but the. The point is pretty clear. I heard that Rav Shlomo Freifeld, Zeichet Tzadik Levrach, he went to Woodstock and made Havdalah there. I heard such a thing. I don't know if it's true or not. Aber Zeichet gehört. Lemaise, where he spent the summer was not too far from there. It's in walking distance. In my neighborhood, so there's what to mention there. So anyway, but spirituality obviously is expressed in many different ways by different people, and but even most of those forms of spirituality have some form of the supernatural in them. Certain forms of Buddhism really don't, and certain forms of Confucianism perhaps don't either, particularly maybe more modern forms. In Buddhism, it's quite often some of the more ancient forms that have nothing supernatural or particularly religious to them. Although people tend to adopt these religious mores, more or less. And reflecting on that, so I had what to say about finding meaning in life, and I mentioned history and politics, that separates us from animals, because I said, and there is an inherent spirituality in that, and I'll be honest with you, I felt very spiritual. I have personally very spiritual feelings that are very similar to religious feelings when I study history. I feel almost a devotional quality, when I learn about George Washington or Thomas Jefferson, or Winston Churchill or whoever else. And to go and visit a place George Washington slept here, it has a feeling of pilgrimage to a holy site. So too I felt in Yellowstone Park, extremely same types of feelings I felt in the Holy Land, in Eretz Yisrael. So these expressions of spirituality and so forth, they're very special. I remember Rav Olbaum Shlita in Queens, a big Dayan in Queens, a very chashuv Rav. He said, he visited an orphanage, and he said he felt the same feeling that you get when you're in Lezhensk by the Rebbe Melech. There was a fire there, by the Rebbe Melech. So, there can be these feelings of spirituality that we can experience as human beings that are different than traditional religious spirituality. And I personally believe, that people who insist on being non-believers, who insist on being skeptics, should still find, even though I'm uncomfortable, and it's out of my comfort zone to say this, but they should still find some spiritual activity, whether it's actually joining a church or a synagogue, even if they disagree with the theology, but they just like the community. That's one possibility. But on the other hand, there are these groups like these outright atheist groups that have all the trappings of religion, of groups like the Society for Ethical Humanism and the Humanistic Judaism and these types of groups, which, even though I vehemently disagree with them because I'm a believer in God, but that being said, there is tremendous positivity that can be gained by having fellowship with people in an effort to better society. And people strive for that, and to have that same experience of the church, the synagogue, the mosque, the temple, even if they are skeptical of the supernatural. It is a natural need of the human being. Some have said that we shouldn't call ourselves Homo sapiens, but rather Homo spiritualis. That we are the humans of the spirit, and that's what distinguishes us from the animal. And when I mentioned about George Washington, I don't think that the Cocker Spaniel dog looks at the first Cocker Spaniel dog that got the AKC certificate and is their ancestor the way that we as Americans look at George Washington. And I don't believe that a queen bee, even though certain animals do have their political structures, I don't think a queen bee is as cognizant of her role of the queen bee as the Queen of England is cognizant of her role as the Queen of England. So, and that can be an expression of spirituality. Certainly, the role of being the Queen of England is a spiritual role. It's a religious role. It's mostly a religious duty. She's basically the Pope of the Church of England. For lack of, more so, her position is superior to that of the Archbishop of Canterbury. And it's a religious duty that she has as the Queen of England. The American president doesn't have that, but still, it's a spiritual expression. There is very, very major aspect of the presidency and of political service altogether. And one other thing that I want to talk about, that we can be open-minded to things of the supernatural, even though I'm not here to pontificate. And again, I'm talking basically the way I would talk in the hospital where I work, is that essentially I like to talk about something I heard from Rabbi Bart Sadok about Jung. That Jung had found such a thing in the world, that he'd studied various people who are diagnosed with mental illness, and found that no matter what religion, culture, whatever, there were certain commonalities that they experienced. And he called this the collective subconscious. That's what Jung referred to. And this experience of the collective subconscious, there's a little bit we could talk about this. And I think we'll have to make a separate video, because I'm at my destination now, and I think on the way back we should discuss this Jungian idea of the collective subconscious and how it could possibly point to the existence of spiritual realms and the supernatural. And one of my patients pointed out that which we call supernatural could be really the supernatural. That, not that it's above nature, but it's the most natural thing there is. So thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe, comment, and all the best. Thank you for watching.